think if we could perhaps get one more chair. Yeah, very good. Thank you.
One of us
Yeah.
standing. Can you
Thank
turn
you.
my mic on?
And can I apologize in advance to everyone who has to spend this afternoon looking at my back? It's very, I will try and turn around occasionally.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I downloaded the Confession app.
Yes.
And I've started, and I have a long way to go before I'm absolved.
Yeah.
I thought we would start off, if it's okay with you, with a quick vote.
Sure.
Just to take the temperature of the audience. So let me ask you a quick question. Una encuesta pequeña. Let's start going out to 25 to 50 years. How many people here believe that probably it's reasonable that we're in a situation where humans are not working? Raise your hand. 25 to 50 years, humans not working. You have to raise your hand. It's the name of your book. Okay, so not too many people. So we have a mission to convince. What about just in the next 5 to 10 years? How many of you see major structural or frictional shifts in the nature of work and a major change in the way our labor markets are organized? Raise your hand.
Very good. And this is where I am. Now, I don't think the challenge for now is that soon we're all going to wake up and find ourselves out of work, that the robots have taken all the jobs. That's very unlikely to happen. What I worry about is this frictional problem, which is there is work for people to do, but that work looks very different or is generated in very different places from where work has traditionally from what work traditionally looks like, and that's a big challenge.
And I think that's very interesting for this group, because this is a conference about education, and we need to understand what are the skills of the near future that are needed in work so that we can educate students to be there. So let's talk a little bit about that. So you have this idea of that there's two ways that technology acts. One is substitution for jobs, and the other is complementarity.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. I mean, there's a lot of talk about which jobs are going to be lost.
Yeah.
I think there's less talk in the press and in articles about what we're doing. What are we going to be doing as humans in the near future?
Yeah.
I mean, where's our place if the routine menial tasks are heavily automated?
I think one of the things that gets in the way of thinking clearly about the future of work is the way in which we talk about jobs. And I've done it already today as well. We talk about lawyers and doctors and teachers and accountants and so on, but actually the term jobs is really unhelpful, because it makes us think that the work that people do is a kind of monolithic, indivisible lump of stuff. When actually, if you look closely at any job, what you see very good. What you see is that people perform a wide variety of different tasks and activities in their jobs. So just, why does this distinction between jobs and tasks matter? Well, McKinsey did this really interesting study of 720 jobs in the US, occupations in the US. And what they found was that only 5% of those jobs could be fully automated given existing technologies. In other words, looked at from the top down in terms of entire jobs, the impact of automation looks relatively muted. Only a very small minority, 5% of jobs can be automated. But what they also found was that 60% of those occupations involved individual tasks, 30% or more of which could be automated. In other words, looked at from the bottom up in terms of tasks, the majority of jobs in the US labor market had a very significant chunk which could already be done very differently. So I think one of the, this way to think clearly about the future of work, we've got to frame the future not by asking the question what jobs are at risk of automation or what jobs are at safe, but instead what sorts of tasks and individual activities might there be for people to do. And conversely, which tasks and activities might be done by or might be automated. And in my view, just simplifying, there are two sets of tasks here. There are those where human beings can effectively compete with these technologies. and there are those that involve human beings building these technologies. And as I said, that might sound relatively straightforward, but I think if you look at what we do in practice, often it's neither of these things. So think just very quickly, think about what, if you're an aspiring lawyer, for instance, you join the legal profession, what does the first 5 to 10 years of being a lawyer look like? It's document review, it's document assembly, it's document retrieval. These are precisely the sorts of routine activities, tasks that these technologies are already very good at doing.
But people talk about, to drill a little bit on the idea of what's left and what are those extra tasks that we're doing. People talk a lot about the social tasks, the interactive tasks, but to take your example of law, so there's the more menial routine part of reading and analyzing documents, but then there's the negotiation part.
Sure.
So why can't my bot negotiate with your bot? I give it parameters, you give yours parameters, and we wait till the bots find an agreement or don't, and then come back for reparameterization. If that happens, and that seems quite feasible, at least to me.
And I think there are people exploring.
That's fun too. And that's the human part, right?
Yeah. Well, what I'm about to say is in no way meant to suggest that human empathy and human interaction is not important. I think it is incredibly important, but I think in thinking about automation, it's sometimes overstated as a sort of as a bottleneck on automation, as a constraint on automation. So let me give you an example of what I mean. I was once talking to a group of accountants, and a particularly boisterous accountant stood up in the room and said, "Look, Daniel, you don't understand. My clients come to me because they want the personal touch. They want the empathetic interaction. They want me to look them in their eye." And I said, that actually, no, that isn't why our clients come to you. They come to you because they want their taxes done efficiently and effectively, and if they can find a more affordable way of doing it that maybe doesn't involve you, they might choose that instead. So the point here is that there is often, and I think this is particularly true in the world of white-collar work, a tendency to conflate the traditional way in which we might have solved a problem, namely human interaction, with the problem itself. And in this case, it's filing your taxes effectively. Now, that's not to say there aren't areas of working life where the thing that we really value, the outcome that matters, is the empathetic interaction. So if I think of something like end-of-life care, for instance, having a human being sitting by your bed is the thing that you value. That's the outcome you want to achieve.
Although even there's some recent research, at least early research, that's done that shows that actually elderly people rated technological care higher than humans in a particular
and so I think
context.
And I think again, some of our assumptions about what the limits to these technologies might be are going to turn out to be misplaced. And I've got lots of stories that I can tell about those sorts of, but I do think there are some areas where there is going to be a sort of irreducible. I think the kind of bigger point here, though, is that I think a lot of the barriers to automation are going to turn out not to be technical ones in the sense of what can and cannot be automated, but they're going to be more sort of cultural, more moral. They're going to be around not what can and cannot be automated, but what should and should not be automated. And you already see this today. We've got technologies that can do remarkable things, but we don't use them because we think it's inappropriate from a kind of cultural or a deeper moral point of view. So again, think of the legal setting. In the US, there are systems that are used to help inform parole decisions in the US justice system. We might think that's fine, but how would we feel about a similar system being used to make life sentencing decisions? We'd probably feel less comfortable about that, even though such systems perhaps exist. Or think about the medical setting. I mentioned systems that can make medical diagnoses, and we might feel comfortable using one of those systems, but how would we feel about systems making decisions to turn off life support systems in a hospital, even though it might be able to make a more efficient decision about the allocation of finite hospital beds, which they can probably already do. Again, the barriers there aren't so much technical, they're more moral, cultural, social. And I think those are the things that are going to really determine where these technologies are adopted and where they're not.
But the job market you describe, and I'm thinking about it now, is very small, actually, right? These kind of very human, empathetic decision situations is not a giant labor market, which does take us towards the larger, the longer out future that you've described of no or much less work
Yeah,
for people, right?
Yeah, well, there's two questions here. One is, can we identify tasks and activities that these technologies cannot do or should not do? I suppose there's three. Can we identify tasks that these technologies cannot do from a technical point of view? Can we identify tasks that these technologies could do, but from an economic point of view, it doesn't make financial sense? So, for instance, there are lots of technologies that can fold laundry, more precisely and exactingly than the finest human beings. But it doesn't make sense to use automated laundry machines because the labor cost of hiring a less productive person to do it, because the labor cost is so much lower, it's not profitable to use the technology. It still makes sense to use the less productive person. So there's the sort of there's the tasks that won't be automated because we can't automate them. There's tasks that won't be automated because it's not economic to automate them. And there's also these tasks that won't be automated because for moral or social or cultural reasons we decide not to automate them. There's that question, what tasks will be left for people to do? And I think in spite of all the technological advances that are taking place, today there are huge realms of human activity that lie beyond the reach of even the most capable technologies. In spite of all the advances I've described, large areas of human activity are out of reach of automation. And that's why I think for the next 10, 20 years, these worries about a world with less work full stop are perhaps overblown. But the second question is okay, given this spread of tasks that are left for people to do, and perhaps a spread that is getting narrower and narrower as technology advances, is there going to be enough demand for all of those activities to keep everyone in work who wants to work? So there's a question about what tasks, and then there's a question about how much demand for those tasks will there be.
And what's your prediction on that?
And it just seems, and this is part of the argument of my book, is that it just seems as that range of activities that are done by human beings gets narrower and narrower and narrower, not in years but in decades to come, it just seems less and less likely to me that there's going to be enough demand for that narrowing range of things to keep everyone in work who wants well-paid work. And so that's the kind of argument that I'm making in a world without work, why we need to take these worries about there not being enough work seriously. Not because I don't think, not because there aren't going to be things for people to do. I think there are, for all the reasons that I've just mentioned. But for this deeper reason that I'm just not convinced there's going to be enough demand for that activity to keep everyone in work.
And so as that happens, let's sort of explore that. So as that happens, as there's this increasing encroachment, I think is the term that you use, and fewer of these jobs that either people want or that are available, I worry a little bit that, if we take medical doctors or medical workers that are doing diagnostic work, and take lawyers, as we already talked about, that, these inference-based tasks, where you have to, look at patterns and make a judgment, I think it's pretty clear that machines are going to do that better. They have access to larger data sets and so forth. So, we may end up with people protesting on the streets who don't have jobs. Doctors, lawyers, designers that have been automated out of their work. Are we prepared in terms of our government to deal with that?
American TV writers.
American TV writers, right? So this is an example. But I wonder, I worry, and I would like to know your opinion. Are we prepared in terms of our government for what we're going to do when those people are out of work?
I don't think we're prepared.
Are we taking it seriously?
I don't think we're prepared in a variety of for a variety of reasons. The US screenwriters is a really interesting example of this. I cannot explain to you how many times over the last 10 years I've stood up in front of groups of people and they've said, look, Daniel, you don't understand. What you're saying is very interesting, but a machine will never be able to do a task that requires creativity from a human being. And yet that is exactly the kind of task that GPT is so good at doing, whether it's generating, poems, jokes, stand-up routines, prose, scripts,
graphics with Midjourney and Dali.
It's doing precisely the kind of activities that require creativity from human beings. And creativity, for many people, was the sort of historic preserve of many of those white-collar creative workers. And the screenwriters' protest is a really interesting example of a protest from a group of workers who did not think that technological progress was going to affect the work that they did. And I think many, and I say we're not ready for it in the sense that intellectually I don't think we've quite grappled with the arguments about whether or not we ought to or not to be on the side of those writers. I think it's actually far more complex than some of the contemporary discussions present it as.
So in this world where the screenwriters and all the other groups that we've talked about need to be retrained, let's think about it from an educational standpoint.
Yes.
I mean, what are the skills we in higher education should be focusing on? And I'll give you an example. I mean, we're spending, at IE Business School, we're spending a lot of time on what we call impact skills.
Yes.
So these are thinking skills, critical thinking, creative thinking, behavioral skills, working with each other, and digital skills in our case. So are we making a good bet on that? I mean, what should be the skills that we need to give to the next generation so that they're not the people in the street out of work?
Yeah. So I think there's a few things to say on this. I mean, one is, the starting point is to not be encouraging students to cut their teeth on routine activities. And it sounds like that's not what you're trying to do, but it is remarkable how often that is what our educational institutions are set up to encourage people to do. I think what you're describing seems broadly right. In that category of compete that I described before, what do I have in mind? I have in mind activities that require communication, interpersonal skills still. I have in mind activities that require faculties like creativity and judgment. Even still, there are very impressive technologies, but they're some way from doing everything. And then you talk about digital skills, and that's very interesting, and that's what I have in mind with Build. I suppose when I talk about Build, what I don't mean there is the sort of this narrow idea that what we ought to do is just teach everyone to code. In part, that's silly because one of the things these technologies are very good at doing is actually writing code. But also because there's a kind of broader way of thinking about digital skills, which, one way to think about it is when I learned to speak French. One of the reasons I learned French was to be able to speak with other French people in that kind of narrow sense, to learn the language. Didn't do a good job of it, but that was one of the purposes. But the other aspect of it was to learn more broadly about France, about the literature, about the people, about the history, about the culture. There was a kind of broader sense of what it meant to learn a language. And I think there's something analogous in thinking about coding and computer science, that it's not simply the narrow activity of learning the language, in part because these technologies are all very good, in part because the language is changing all the time, but also because there is a way of thinking about the world if you're a kind of programmer, a way of thinking about problems and how to solve them and how to structure the environment that I think is very useful to know, even if you don't speak the language particularly well. So that's the sort of thing that I have in mind there. I think that the thing I'd say as well is that just thinking about what we teach isn't enough. We've also got to think about the how and the when. And I didn't get to say too much on those. Maybe I could just say something.
I personally would love to hear the dean of a business school, so please.
Yeah, I mean, just one thing that gets me very excited in thinking about the how is personalized learning. So I was a fellow at Oxford for 5 or 6 years, so I spent a lot of time in a tutorial setting with 1, 2, 3 students and myself. And it's one of the few very robust results we have from education research that one-to-one tuition is incredibly effective. An average student who receives one-to-one tuition will tend to outperform, I think it's about 98% of students in a traditional classroom setting. So it's incredibly effective, but it's also incredibly expensive. We cannot provide that sort of interactive human-to-human experience at scale. That's why it's called the 2 sigma problem. 2 sigma because an average student will tend to outperform 2 sigma, 2 standard deviations of average students in a traditional classroom setting. A problem because it's not affordable. 2 sigma problem. Personalized learning, software that tries to tailor what is taught, how it's taught, the way in which it's taught, all the different dimensions of the educational experience to the particular demands and needs, the strengths and weaknesses of the individual student is extremely exciting because it promises to replicate that kind of one-to-one human interaction, but to do it at a far lower cost. And so in the kind of subjects that I've historically taught, things like mathematics, things like economics, where there are answers which are, relatively well defined, these sorts of technologies are really exciting. So I think there's a lot of experimentation and piloting to be done in thinking about what we teach. I don't think we have enough of that. And then there's the when as well.
And the last question, because we're almost out of time, is, so I'm dying to know, so do you see technology replacing at all, in some cases, the professor in the classroom, or do you see technology complementary and taking away the routine, menial aspects of it and freeing the professor to do more human things?
I think at the moment it is complementary. It's a combination of both. I can see certain activities that I would have done 10 years ago that I don't do anymore because technology can do them more efficiently, more effectively. There are certain types of, if I was to redesign a course in mathematics for economists, that was one of the courses I taught for first year undergraduates. There's a lot of that material that I wouldn't teach myself. I'd instead rely on online material from someone like Salman Khan at Khan Academy, who just does a terrific job of teaching some of the more routine aspects of mathematics, and then I'd be able to focus on other stuff. I think that what really worries me is that many teachers, professors, academics see these technologies as they currently stand as a threat. And so the kind of instinctive reaction that we saw from a lot of educational institutions to ban GPT, for instance, is sort of indicative of that fear. And I think that's a great mistake. We should be asking instead, how can we use these technologies to improve the educational experience rather than see them as a threat?
I think we are out of time, but you've given us a lot to think about, especially me in my case, and I hope everybody else as well. So please join me in a thank you to Daniel.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Daniel. Vale. Thank you so much, Lee. Thank you so much, Daniel. Estaríamos, la verdad, toda la tarde escuchándonos, pero no tenemos tiempo. Por cierto, en un ratito va a estar Daniel.
Well, you have Daniel at the Q&A on the third floor in the Agora after this conversation with Daniel Susskind, where he gave us some information on how would be the employment in the future. And before, I'd like to tell you that we continue on streaming with a parallel program on floor 3 and floor 4 with workshops and activity. Now we have Carlos Santana, which is a YouTuber specializing on AI. And now we continue with our program here, and we'll continue with some questions like, can educational systems adapt to the pace of technology? Another question, what should we do for digital education to reach everyone? And is there any control on the quality and quantity and diversity in educational contents? There's a report, which is Technology in Education in terms of UNESCO, that offers data and answers to questions like these ones. So in this session, we'll learn about the main conclusions of this report that are presented for the first time here in Spain. So we'll have on this panel the representatives of UNESCO, OE, and Profuturo with the moderation of Maria Zavala.
¿Hacia dónde? Perdón, voy por aquí. Qué presión.
Nos falta. Ya, perdón.
Buenas tardes, ¿se me oye?
Hello, can you hear me? So now it's hard to try and be as interesting as the previous session. We are so disruptive, the members of this panel, that we won't be speaking about AI. We'll be discussing other things which are also related to AI. Before entering the room here, I asked ChatGPT how it thought I could start presenting an event that has to do with technology in education. And ChatGPT has answered me that I should do it with caution and with calm because this is a controversial issue. Obviously, ChatGPT is well informed because he has read all the news about this. Some months ago, there were many headlines in this country and other countries that were telling us that UNESCO was recommending that countries should ban cell phones in schools. And this news has been replicated in different media and conversations, starting debates between people that know more or less about education, about learning, and about technology, but we all have opinions. In line with this news, there was an event in Montevideo where the edition 2023 of the report Global Education Monitoring made for the UNESCO, that's an independent report which is not done by the UNESCO, but is done for the UNESCO in order to follow the state of education around the world. In this event, there were education ministers from several countries, and this is a report on the state of education around the world, trying to assess the compliance of all the education aspects related with the Awwz. And this was in relation with technology in education, and has done that with from different angles. One focusing on sustainability of technology in education, another one on equity, if we are all in the same situation, scalability, and also the need, the relevance, whether it is based on methodology or other aspects. Today we are presenting in the framework of Enlighted for the first time in Spain this report, and I hope that we can speak about it with calm and with caution and based on evidence and on facts, which is important when you are educating new generations rather than being based on extreme opinions. This session will be speaking both English and Spanish so that we can be understood by Manos. I have prepared my presentation in English, but Manos told me he can understand Spanish. So I'm introducing Manos Antoninis. He is the director of this report since 2016. Before, he coordinated estimations of the finance deficit for the educational aspects of Awwz's agenda, and the database on inequities in education. He has represented the team of this report in the group of technical cooperation on the indicators of Objective 4 of the Awwz that are regarding the quality education and promoting learning opportunities, and he currently co-chairs this group. Welcome, Manos, to Spain. It is a pleasure to be able to discuss with you this report and its conclusions and recommendations. Then we have Leticia Rato. She's responsible for global alliances at Profuturo, in a program created by Fundación La Caixa and Fundación Telefónica, representing 55 countries. He's taking part in this program since the beginning. She's been for 1 decade in telecom, but before he had several responsibilities in the Banco Americano de Desarrollo. She has focused on diversity and inclusion, and it's also a great pleasure to have you here, Leticia. And in the center we have Tamara Diaz. She's General Director of Education and Vocational Training of the Latin American Countries Organization, leading the Latin American program of digital transformation and education, focusing on moving towards hybrid models in order to offer a universal access to education. And she's been responsible for the Assessment Institute of OAA, and also she's been leading programs on technology and education. She's written many papers and taking part in many education research programs. I am Maria Zavala. I'm a journalist. I'm a mother of 3 people that go to school, and at school they use technology. I also use technology in my daily life. I'm author of the book Being Parents in the Digital Age, and I focus on family and technology and education in this crazy society with all this technology around us. I'm director of Society and Technology in the communication group Awwz. Tamara representing Profuturo and OIE, as these 2 entities are main stakeholders in Latin America in education and technology, and both organizations has contributed to the GEM report with their experience and knowledge. And in 2022 they organized a consultation event in Madrid where the State Secretary for Education took part with several ministers from Latin America. And that's it. Now we'll start this panel that we could understand this is like a class, like a course, so that we feel younger. Like if we were in the high school, we'll have more hands-on parts and then more theory parts with someone that knows telling us what he knows. But then we'll start with a practical part. Please don't steal that from me, because I need to change the slides.
Despediros a la audiencia.
First thing we're going to do is to ask the audience to participate, for those who are here and those who are following us through internet. We're going to use the Menti platform. Could you please show this slide where you can see the QR code? You can either take a photograph of the code, or you can access menti.com and insert the code. So we can move on to our survey and give your answers that will be completely anonymous to preserve your privacy. I will give you some time so that you can access the menti.com website or scan the code. If you have children or if you have students, you probably have done this, whether with menti.com or with other types of platforms. So let's start with a first statement that we can, as a conclusion, obtain from the report. Almost 1 out of 4 countries forbids the use of smartphones in the schools. This can have a negative impact when used too much in the classroom. It can take the children several minutes to go back to get concentrated back again after using their smartphones. Do you agree with the prohibition of the use of mobile phones in schools? Are you agreed with that? You can answer yes, no, or I don't know.
Estamos ahí cambiando de colores. No sé si todo el mundo está viendo en pantalla la evolución, ¿sí? Bueno, veo que ya está un poco más tranquilo el tema, o sea que la mayoría...
I think that most of the people who we're going to answer have already given their answer. Let's move on to the next question. 89% of over 100% of educational products can actually monitor children, which is the digitization, what the digital products know about the users. However, only 16% of the countries ensures privacy of personal data in the educational context. So my question is, who should ensure the privacy of data in the educational context, in the educational environment? We won't be giving you any hints to answer the question. It is an open question.
El gobierno,
So we see the government, the state government, the educational center companies, I understand the tech companies, parents as well, government, parents in school. We also see the answers in English. That makes me very happy that we have English-speaking listeners. But the words that we read most here in this cloud of words are state and government. Let's move on to the next question. Just 54% of countries have defined digital skills that they want to prioritize in their study programs. They do not want to focus on specific devices, and the educational programs change every 3 years or more or less, but the bigger programs only change every 10 years. So what skills do you think are needed by teachers in our century when we think about the digital skills that included for the educational environment by the European Commission? What skills are key for the 21st century teacher? The options are search and handling of information and data, communication and collaboration, digital content creation, safety and problem solving. You can read the answers also in English for those of you who are English speakers.
Pues para no extender.
In order not to take too much time with this survey, we're going to leave this aside. We will go back to this later, and I will give the control to Manos. We're going to start with our masterclass so that Manos can share with us the main conclusions from this report, the GEM report done by the UNESCO about technology in education. Manos, the floor is yours.
Espero que es.
I hope that this will start working. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to present this report on the monitoring of education in 2023. I would like to start by thanking Fundación Telefónica and the rest of the sponsors for having us here today, and also the Awwz to share this panel with us. The GEM report, as Maria has said, is an independent report that is hosted and published by the UNESCO. We are the tool of the international community in order to monitor the progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. We are here to talk about another tool, the last edition of the report that was launched in Montevideo in July, focused in technology in education. This is a topic that is under discussion and very controversial. There has been a great progress in this field in the past 4 years. To give you an idea, the number of people participating in online courses has increased up to 220 million in just 10 years, not including China. The artificial intelligence tools have been very quickly adopted. In 2022, a survey among professionals in the United States found out that 19% of teachers had used ChatGPT in one way or another in their jobs. But it is also true that the use of technology is not so spread or transformative as you would think. Only half of the secondary schools have a connection to internet, and if we have used PISA data, and we see that only 1 out of 10 secondary students out of middle and high income countries said that they would use 1 hour their technological devices in science or math lessons. Let's think that we might contemplate the adoption of technology as setting the goal of children coming out of school, reading and having a basic knowledge in mathematics. We can say that before digital technologies arrived, a great number of developed countries had achieved this goal. Technology is not a requirement for achieving this goal. It's only another tool among many. So we need to ask ourselves, what are the educational problems that we're trying to solve? Can technology help us facing these problems, and if so, in what way? It might seem strange, but we never or rarely ask ourselves these questions in this order. We tend to think of the way we can apply technology for education, even when it has not been designed taking into account education. When we talk about equity or fairness, technology offers educational opportunities to millions of people, but it also leaves aside many more. In terms of quality, the report states that certain educational technologies can improve certain types of learning in certain contexts, but we cannot think that everything that shines is gold. It's a system that has been used by 25 million students in the United States, but they did not achieve better results than those who used traditional technologies or methods. In terms of efficiency, several problems hinder the performance of technology. For instance, smart systems can track the progress of students, and the difficulty can be adjusted to create specific paths for students. However, the educational managers sometimes cannot analyze data properly in order to adapt these studying paths. So we see that there are 4 challenges or 4 situations that we need to take into account. First, when it comes to customization and adapting, this clashes with the social dimension of education, where students get together in order to learn from each other. Secondly, technology can offer means for including less favored students, but there's a lot of exclusion that arises from the use of technology. Also, commercial interests or business interests tend to clash with the general interest. Also, the business language is more used when it comes to making decisions to technology and education than educational terms. Also, efficiency in the short term might hinder performance in the long term. We need to also consider education in terms of environmental sustainability. We need to be also aware of the risks connected to the use of artificial intelligence in education. Large masses of data that could be used to improve learning are already being used to gather information about people for reasons that are unrelated to education and that even violates their privacy. Those predictive models that are so perfect that people could overtrust them or lose total confidence in information, total trust in information. There is also the possibility of having biases in algorithms. For instance, in the United Kingdom, we saw that these biases increased inequalities during the pandemic. The value of technology needs to be shown in terms of the human dimension. We need a sort of compass when it comes to implementing technology and applying it to education. The first question we need to ask ourselves is if this use of technology is relevant for its context and if it is in line with the goals of learning. Governments need to identify what digital technologies have shown have demonstrated that they improve learning, and how, in order to adapt the study programs and technology accordingly. It's also important to design policies about education and technology, having students and teachers involved in the process. In the United States, only 41% of the main leaders were asked about this. We need to adapt the solutions to the context. In 2018, a survey determined that only 43% of teachers in secondary school felt ready to use technology for educational purposes after having been trained. The second question we need to ask ourselves is if the use of technology in education is also fair. We need to support the technology that supports marginalized demographics. We need to make sure that the devices comply with the global accessibility standards. We need to set national goals in terms of access to internet in schools by 2030 as part of a global process. Also, governments need to promote digital public goods for education and have a consensus in terms of quality for the platforms. The third question we need to ask ourselves is the use of technology scalable? We need to have the mechanisms that enable us to assess technology, but unfortunately, very few governments do have this type of assessment mechanisms. The United States has a method, but a very low percentage of all products that had been registered had shown a real performance. Also, we need to estimate the total cost of ownership. We have estimated that the first investment only represents 25% of the total cost of such products. We also need to make decisions regarding the decentralization of the decision making and the partnership with the private sector. We need to understand that countries need to have a framework to assess the digital skills that is broad, that is aimed at the citizenship, not only aimed at the labor market and not only connected to a certain technology. Sometimes we need not to look further. The analysis of the PISA data suggests that students that are weaker in reading had 5 times more possibilities of being cheated by phishing emails compared to students whose reading skills were more solid. This reminds us that in order to navigate the digital world, all we need is an education that is of high quality. In the face of new technological tools, the response might not be a better specialization in technology, but a better balanced study programs that promotes the arts, the humanities, in order to promote empathy, a moral compass, creativity, and cooperation among students. We need to protect human rights, the well-being, the security, the safety, and the privacy of students and teachers alike. As it has been said, when the apps were reviewed, we found that 90% of the products used during COVID were gathering data of children. We also need to consider the energy and environmental effects of the use of these technologies. For instance, extending the life of the laptops in the European Union for only 1 year would represent a saving for the environment that would equal removing 1 million cars from the roads. We also need to focus this in the results of the learning and in the students and the human beings themselves. Artificial intelligence cannot replace but must complement human beings. Thank you very much.
Manos tiene mucho mérito.
Manos, we need to credit him because the report is over 400 pages and he clearly has an excellent capacity for summarizing such information. I have to thank him also for presenting a debate that is broader than technology yes or technology no in the schools. Let's move on to a discussion. People who like technology does not need to hate philosophy, so I would suggest that we open a more philosophical discussion now. So I'm going to start with you, Leticia. Well, I would like to congratulate Manos and the rest of the team for such a report. This has been a great opportunity to be able to participate in this study.
Que nos sentimos muy reflejados en la.
We feel that these conclusions reflect us very well. Many of the things that you present here are part of the work that we carry out in Profuturo. There is a challenge when it comes to introducing technology to education. COVID-19 caused the emergence of many new technologies, trying to help children not to lag behind, and we might have left the pedagogical side of the education aside. We need to focus in the school, in the teachers, in the children, and everything that we might develop in terms of technology needs to serve the purpose of education. We have been working for many years, and the GEM report reflects many of the challenges that we have encountered and many of the threats that we have encountered in those years. When it comes to the dealing with the context, with the localization of the education and the technology, there are many challenges and threats, but we believe that digital transformation in the educational environment is possible, but always taking into account the voices of all the actors, and when you make sure that they can profit from all the competences and they can develop all the skills necessary to make a good use of technology, we believe that we can make good proposals in terms of using technology so that teachers and the educational centers can have good proposals for the students. And regarding to, also related with what Manos was saying, we experiment a lot, we find the evidence in order to be able to scale this. And I wanted to ask you something, Manos. The GEM report says that there is a lack of solid evidence related to the value of technology, digital technology in education. How do you think we can gather useful evidence in a field that changes so much as the technology field? Should I answer in Greek, since this is a Socratic dialogue?
That you give me this opportunity. It's true that this report was a bit of a headache for us because evidence on education, impartial evidence on education, is quite limited. Of course, one of the problems is how quickly technology is changing. There's this fact that we use that apparently every product changes every 3 years. 3 years is the cycle of research. From the moment you try to find funding, you write the proposal, you get the funding, you start selecting your sample. That's really a time by which there's a new product. So there's always this catch-up playing. There's also the complexity. I think the report tries to make this point that we should stay away from ideas that education is, technology is good in itself as a blanket solution. No. Technologies exist for specific education problems, but then that makes it very difficult to research because many people try to attract attention by focusing on generalities, but in reality you have to be very specific about that, and then the context and whether these contexts can be repeated, replicated and scaled up. We also noted that there is this issue that a lot of the evidence in fact ends up coming from the organizations that have most interest in seeing that technology being used, those who sell it. And that also adds complications, because where we have had independent evaluations of the same products, sometimes the evidence contradicts the original findings. But ultimately, the big problem we have, and I'll finish here, is to say that the fact of the matter is that there is not enough evidence, and the vast majority of products, in the UK there's a study that less than 1/5 of products circulating in the market had been subject to a research, let alone the results of that research. So we have a challenge, and that challenge is very big for all countries. Governments in principle, as I said, should have some units evaluating, but getting around the complexity and finding the resources to do that is beyond the means of most governments. So at the end of the day, it is a challenge where we will need different countries to pool resources together, especially the poorer countries, before they invest in technology.
Bueno, pero ¿a quién no le gusta?
But everyone likes a challenge. I think that we need to persevere, that we need to keep trying. From the OIS, what's your take on the current situation of education at the moment? Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I think that the report is very relevant at the moment, and especially when we think about Latin America, this has a twofold relevance. On the one hand, the theme, and on the other hand, because of the timing. First, how can we incorporate technologies so it's useful for education? This is a theme, a topic that is at the center of the agenda of Latin American governments. And I think it's very important to note, as you said at the beginning, that this is the first time that the World Report is presented in a Latin American country. It's the first time that it is presented in a Spanish-speaking country, and especially a country that has a prestige at an international level, Uruguay, because we all know the educational plan in Uruguay that has been working since 2007, focusing in equity and the reduction of the digital gap in education. And also, I commend the focus that you gave your report, the focusing in quality and equity. I think that Latin America, we all know that it is a very rich region, but also full of inequalities. This has been shown in the pandemic from the OIS. We support countries in their efforts to give continuity to education, and the truth is that 40% of the students did not have connectivity to the internet, and there was a response from several countries who were able to bring digital platforms to their educational centers, but certain countries had to use radio, television, and even we have ended up printing certain booklets to distribute, and this is a great inequality that we see in Latin America, and we need to take it into account as well. I believe that we're all aware that we're also living through a very complex time. The educational systems are recovering after the pandemic, and there's a lot of forced displacement, armed conflicts, and in education we see, as you also said before, the arrival of artificial intelligence that presents a lot of questions that forces governments and institutions to give an answer in a timely manner, and also protecting minors and all the actors in the educational context. And I would like to ask you a question, Manos, because I would like to know what you think about certain conclusions of the report. Some of them might lead us to think that they are sort of warning us about the inclusion of technologies in education. But can you really compare the reality of developed countries where we can see an overuse of technology with the reality of countries such as some of the countries in Latin America where the digital gap can leave some children behind? Well, that is a very good.
Recognizes that nowhere in the world today would we not recognize and accept that digital skills are part of a new set of basic skills. What we knew a few years ago no longer holds. We need to have digital skills to navigate the digital world, although you probably heard me also saying that we also have to be very, very broad-minded, because sometimes the solution is right behind us and we shouldn't go too far. And that brings me to respond by saying, yes, there is a digital gap, but there are also other education gaps that are perhaps more urgent in that respect. The first is, of course, the access gap. We have 9 out of 10 young people finishing secondary school in high-income countries, but only 6 in 10 globally, and 3 in 10 in Africa. That's a much bigger and much more urgent gap that needs to be resolved. And there is also a learning gap which is even more extreme, because 8 in 10 young people in high-income countries reach minimum proficiency, but only 1 in 10 do so in the world's poorest countries. And that's a more urgent thing. And I think policymakers are confronted with very, very difficult dilemmas because there is a considerable cost. We estimated as part of this report that for low and lower middle income countries to achieve their national targets, not even universal, national targets, there is a funding gap of about $100 billion per year between now and 2030, even if we have ambitious assumptions about how much money they put to education. But we also estimated very modest costs of offline solutions for low-income countries and school connectivity in lower middle-income countries. That adds another 50% to that financing gap. And these are, given that we are talking about Socrates, ethical dilemmas of major significance about where we place our resources.
Sí, lo sé, no digo Sócrates. Bueno, vamos a profundizar.
Well, let's go in depth into our discussion, but I would like to ask you to be very synthetic, very brief in your answers. I don't know if we can see on screen the next set of slides based on other conclusions from your report, from the report, with different messages. The first one, I would like to ask you for a very brief answer, if you can. It talks about a full digital transformation based on internet connection would cost about $1 billion per day, only to be able to operate in the poorest countries.
Challenge we have. We need to find more proof that some of our investments in technology, in education, help save costs. So far, limited is evidence. We do save costs, but mainly in richer countries that already have an infrastructure. For example, you can have digital textbooks, that saves a lot of costs. But in poor countries, we don't have that. And countries lack basic things like classrooms do not have enough teachers, they have too many students. 1 in 3 so 3 children need to share a textbook, even worse in early grades. Teachers' quality is very low, sometimes not much stronger than the students. These are urgent priorities, and we need to put everything in perspective when we decide how to invest. Clearly, connectivity is part of our right to education. So that's necessarily an investment that needs to take place. But we need to make sure that when we do it, we reach all children, and we make sure that it becomes part of the pedagogy and the new resources that these children lack.
Tamara, el 92%.
Tamara, 92% of the content of the World Library Energy Commons is in English. So what should we do with this? Well, I wish I knew the answer, but I think the data are quite clear. This is a platform which is a digital library to share resources, educational resources between teachers and educators, and over 95% is in English. So we have a language barrier for the access to this content and also for the ability to create and disseminate. And we all know here that technology needs to be fed with data, with language. And if we are not able for these bases, which are sometimes in several languages, but since we are over 600 million Spanish-speaking people, we have the proportion is not representing this population. So I think we should invest, but also we need more political will, international policies that protect the prestige of language and also of developing it in these digital spaces. Leticia, only a fourth of the educational system have a law that ensures the training of teachers in technology. Could we raise this proportion? Well, at Pro Futuro, the teacher is key to anything that happens at school. And if we are dealing, if we speak about digital transformation, we believe that teachers should be digitally empowered so that they can help children to develop these 21st century skills. So what we do is not only help in the development of skills regarding technology among teachers, but we go beyond this as they need to develop other type of skills, and we have a self-assessment tool for teachers, and this self-assessment positions them in a situation to develop a training path to get trained. So this way they can develop these skills to be able to introduce technology at school. This is why anything that we do should be done with teachers. It's going to be in relation with schools. It should be based on evidence, on successful evidence, and you need to have feedback to keep on improving. So the center should be the teacher. We'll finish this lecture today with an exam regarding the questions that we presented the audience with at the beginning, just to know what you think very fast, please. So Tamara, the data that an 89% of over 100 products of educational technology may watch children, who should guarantee security here? Well, we have heard that state, government, families, I think we all agree with, most people think this is an increasingly relevant topic. AI has exacerbated this problem. This is a powerful tool for monitoring, but it implies some risks in terms of privacy and data protection. And if you're dealing with children, which are vulnerable, in Spain, we'll say this becomes worse. So responsibility should be to the one who's guaranteeing the right to education. This is the government. So I think we all agree on this, but there are other stakeholders who are also responsible. For example, the family, responsible to know what kind of tools there are and how they can protect their children when using some spaces. Also from companies, there's a responsibility towards what kind of materials they are using with these technologies. But my opinion is that the one that should coordinate the different stakeholders and define also in line to what the report says, which technology can be used for education and with which goals, I think this should be states. So if only 50% of the countries have defined the digital skills they want to establish as priorities in their learning programs, which of these skills should be chosen? Do you know what was the data of, does anybody pass this exam, communication? Some people here is saying communication. Well, as this is, please try and be brief. Well, what we do in Pro Futuro is we follow the skills framework of the European Union, the ECOM, using these soft skills, communication, coordination, critical analysis of information, all that has to do with problem solving skills. This is part of our training plans that we implement both to help teachers and children. When we discuss skills, we should think how to implement this in the classroom, and also in terms of how we have these self-assessment tools for teachers to choose these training programs. This is very important, how they land this to the classroom. And we should also think, and we use this constructivist dynamics, where the learning subject is in the center of his or her learning process, and also anything that's related with adapting to local context. When you were introducing us, we work in 45 countries, so we have many different contexts, cultural, social, and it is true that technology is a lever for customizing this, so you can adapt to different contexts. The resources that you have and your learning plans. So it is true that their customizing and individualizing is crucial. Manos, the last question, that question. 1 in 4 questions ban the use of smartphones in schools. Should we ban them according to this report or to the UNESCO?
This report, because of these newspaper titles that came at the end of July. But you saw the messages of the report, right? It is impossible for a report, even if it's as long as you say, to be dealing with every single technology and issuing pronouncements about whether it should be banned or not banned. That's not what we do. We prepare the principles, for basic principles that matter. But it's true that along the way we came across this statistic. We did our research and found that many countries were moving in that direction, and we were quite surprised. We also found that evidence now is emerging about how phones in a classroom distract, and teachers are complaining, let alone parents. All of them, of course, complain. But it's true that it seemed to touch a raw nerve. The journalists saw this fact and gave publicity to it. Of course, we're happy because more people read about it, but it seemed to have touched the raw nerve because people care. They see there's something going wrong. And of course, under the broad umbrella of saying that every technology should be appropriate and lead to learning, maybe one could say that policymakers should consider that. But of course, blanket bans are not solutions to anything, really. They can often backfire. At the end of the day, we know that there are some types of learners that need phones. Learners with disabilities can have major breakthroughs in their education opportunities if they have access to a phone. Not all of them, but some types of them. So policies need to be tailored to countries' needs. At the end of the day, what matters is how a school community operates, and school communities need to discuss. Some countries need laws because there's no other mechanism. Other countries have more capacity to engage students and the teachers in such dialogue. So I think what the report managed to do was to open the issue and invite communities all over the world to discuss about it. I'm sure they will find the solution that suits their objectives.
Yo también creo que encontraremos la solución.
I also think that we'll find a solution if we all get involved. So far we have seen that in educational innovation and technology, the central parts are about education and the organization and what we want to teach and how we want to teach, more than with technology. This is not about technology yes or no in the schools, and the answer is technology yes, but not for anything, and not bringing down anything else, which is still important. So I'd like to thank Tamara, Leticia, and Manos for being here today, and thanks also to all the audience for being here with us or on streaming, and thanks also to UNESCO, OAE, and Pro Futuro, also to Enlighted for inviting us, and also the entities that make it possible, Fundación Telefónica, Fundación La Caixa, EU University South Summit. And thanks to all educators around the world in developing countries and developed countries that get up every day to try and teach young children to become better persons, and they don't get much recognition. Actually, the headlines that we get is about opposing teachers to families, and thanks also to families that understand technology is not just a barrier or a ghost that's not important. I think that technology can bring many good things for those of us who are educating our children at home these days, and a special mention to children and youngsters that today are students, are currently students, because they deserve that adult people build an education system of quality, which is what they deserve, in line with the world where they live in, which is not the world where we grew up in, and putting these children and young people in the center with AI or without AI. What's important is to teach them how to learn. Thanks.
¿Me escuchan? Sí. Muchísimas gracias a los cuatro. Muchas gracias por compartir.
Well, thanks for sharing with us the main conclusions of this report, which is presented for the first time in Spain on technology and education. As Manos has said, this is a very controversial topic. Now we'll have a coffee break. No, just a break of 2 minutes, because we are lagging behind the schedule. I'd like to say hello to those following us on streaming, and we'll be back in 2 minutes, and we'll leave you with the Alex, which is the soundtrack of this event.
Well, sometimes I get out by myself and I look across the water. And I think of all the things what you going might end up in a picture. Cause since I come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger, the way you like to dress. Won't you come on over, stop making a fool out of me? Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Valerie, Valerie, do-do-do, Valerie. Did you have to go to jail? Put your house up for sale? Did you get a good lawyer? Hope you didn't catch a tan. I hope that you found the right man to fix it for you. Now you're shopping anyway. Change the colors of your hair. You're so dizzy. Don't you think about the fine? Don't you be the better fine? You're still dizzy. Since I come home, well, my body's been a mess, and I miss your ginger, the way you like like a dress. Won't you come on over? Stop making a fool out of me. Why don't you come on over, Valerie? Valerie, 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 why don't you come on over, Valerie? Someone told me long ago there's a calm before the storm. I know it's been coming for some time. When it's over soon, they say it'll rain a sunny day. I know, shining down like water. Have you ever seen the rain? I don't know. Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? Yesterday and days before, sun is cold, rain and sun. I know forever all my life, till forever and it goes through the circle, fast and slow. I know I can stop and wonder. I would know. Have you ever seen the rain? I wanna know. Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? I wanna know. Have you ever seen the rain? I wanna know. Have you ever seen the rain coming down on a sunny day? Thank you. Will it be good? Will it be good? Down in Louisiana, close to New Orleans, went back to Peter Wood upon the evergreens. Stood alone in cabin where the brotherhood will leave a country boy named Johnny B. Good. But never ever let her read a whatsoever. But he could play the guitar just like a ringing bell. Go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, 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 Johnny, go, go, Johnny B. Good. You ain't nothing but a hound dog out, will crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, well, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never caught around me down, you ain't a friend of mine.
Gracias, un aplauso para los Alex.
Big round of applause for Los Alex. I don't know if you made it on purpose because you were playing Johnny B. Good from the movie Back to the Future, and I say this because this is how I got to know this song, and it's very fitting for this sessions. Certainly time flies when you're having fun, and we are reaching now the end of our sessions today. We're going to have with us Edo Segal and Iklasidu, and we also have Daniel Susskind, who is a journalist and educator, and she is also the president of a tech company, and we're going to discuss the consequences of the tools and the technology that might have in education looking forward.
All right. Okay, welcome everyone. All right, the really big surprise is that I'm going to do the entire talk in Spanish. Okay, not enough people laughed because clearly you don't know me to know that I don't know any Spanish. All right, so we're going to... Edo, how's your Spanish?
Not ever.
All right, so you're... Sorry.
I got nothing.
So, okay, you're going to have to do your best with our version of just in English here. And
this is a very temporary problem.
It can be learned.
Well, AI is going to solve this for us very soon.
Okay, all right. AI is going to solve this. All right, so what we're going to talk about is basically how education is colliding with AI. How do these things come together? And by the way, if at any time you want to be part of this conversation, just raise your hand and we'll take your input or your question. And so, you know, we might be just talking about something and you're like, oh, that's dull. What I really want to know, and happy to bring you into the conversation.
And I'll add that there's a prize for the person that asks the most thought-provoking question.
All right.
It's not cash, but there's a prize.
And by the way, there's a third person on this panel. I don't know if you noticed that. All right, I haven't introduced you, but I'm about to also introduce Esther. Hi, Esther.
Hi.
Hey, can you?
Silicon Valley.
That's right, right. That's actually the reason why we had this session at the very end of the day, because otherwise it will be like 2 or 3 in the morning for her. I will appreciate all of you for staying right to the end for the best session of the day, but in advance, I'll just say that. So anyway, we're definitely going to talk about AI and education. I'm going to introduce both of you a little bit, one at a time, and I'm going to ask you just to start, like after I introduce you, I'm going to ask for your just pre-statement, like just before we go into it, do you have any comments about education or AI or their intersection? Okay, that's going to be the question. So let me start with Esther, okay? So Esther or the Waj, I don't know, either way, I can say it just in her introduction, in her rough introduction, she is probably one of the most famous educators in the entire world for 25 plus years. She can correct me with all the details here, but you know, over 25 years, she's been a really famous teacher and in the Palo Alto school system in Silicon Valley. not only have her students done amazingly well, her own kids did amazingly well. One of them was the founder, CEO of YouTube, one for 23andMe, and one is a professor in UCSF, University of California, San Francisco. And I think based on all that success, she has a second book which she wrote on how to raise successful people. I think she's really got the credibility for both the teaching and the raising of successful people. So Esther, I want to first really appreciate that you're joining and like getting up early and like joining remotely. But AI and education, just your initial thought, it's kind of like a psychology Rorschach test. I say AI, education, what comes to your mind?
So the main thing that comes to my mind with AI education is the fear that school districts and educators have of AI. And one of the problems is that when anything new is introduced into the education system, the number one reaction is fear. I just remember what happened when calculators were introduced into the system. And the school districts banned calculators. And they didn't want any of the kids to use them because they said if you use a calculator, you won't learn to add and subtract. So we have some of the same behavior happening now where schools and universities are afraid that AI is going to take over and that students are not going to be educated the way they should be. My philosophy in education has been to empower the students, to give them the opportunity to believe in themselves and to work independently. That's probably the reason that my program was so popular and why it grew to such a degree. I realized that AI is a new toy out there for everybody. It's pretty fun to play with, and I don't think that banning it is a good idea, because when you ban something, it becomes even more sweeter. You want to find out why it's banned. So the main thing I think is that school districts need to realize that AI can be a real asset. It can help teachers be better teachers. It can answer questions that students might have that they ask repeatedly, and that the teacher now doesn't have to answer those questions. The AI can answer the questions. So in a nutshell, that's my philosophy, that we should allow students to use AI and to bring the ways that they use AI to help their learning into the classroom and help the teachers understand that it's not such a threat, but it's an asset to helping us educate students more effectively.
Okay, wonderful. So that's a great pre-statement, and just the two keywords were fear and basically, in a way, the asset for what teachers will be able to do, like an assistance to teachers. Okay, now Edo, I'll just do a minimal introduction for you, which is really hard actually, because I don't even know the number of companies that you've been the CEO of. You're definitely the CEO of TouchCast now. You founded a lot of different things. You've got the perspective of a businessman. You've got the perspective of technology and AI, because you've been working with it for years. And it just like, it's not written anywhere, but like my translation, you've been kind of at the center of like the intersection of technology and art, or maybe technology, art, and business, but kind of at this intersection, just like, I'm gonna say, you don't just know it, but like you live it. Like it's kind of become you, or you've become it, or whichever. So with all of that kind of background, what's your pre-statement on AI and education?
So first, disclaimer, I feel a bit like an interloper in this panel with great minds like Esther and yourself as educators. My better half, Ayelet, is actually got her PhD at Columbia Teachers College, so I've benefited from seeing her journey in the future of education and progressive education and project-based learning as opposed to more formal learning. So I've learned through symbiosis a bit, and unfortunately she couldn't make it today. But I've lived this world since for the last 30 years, and for me it's somewhat of almost like a spiritual journey. It's a journey for ultimately this notion of a collective consciousness, which is translated by, depending on where you're born, into Jehovah or Allah or Hindu gods. And now we're in a place where we, for the first time, have some technologies that allow us to empirically touch this gestalt of all of us, of this collective knowledge we have. And I think I meet with many CEOs. Our company is very successful in this field, working with massive consultancies like Accenture, who's both an investor and a partner with over 700,000 employees using our technologies to help reinvent what consulting is, which is a really big deal. Consulting is teaching in many ways, so I've had some exposure to that as well. And I think my experience talking to a lot of CEOs, and I think also listening to some of the talks here, is that I don't think people really understand what this thing is. And my contribution, hopefully in this short session, would be to maybe help illuminate what I think it is. And as a spoiler, it's not ChatGPT. It's not something that write me a blog post and it writes you a blog post. That is such a tiny bit of what this thing is. This thing is a seismic revolution, because everything we have accomplished as a species is driven by cognition. Like, we're not sitting in a cave talking about our last hunt with the fire. We're sitting here with microphones, and because of cognition. And we now have this newfound ability that is really, I think, going to revolutionize the field of education. It's possibly the most obvious place where it's going to make a very obvious positive outcome. There's a lot of other areas where it's a mixed bag, leaning towards negative. Whereas with education, I think it's pure upside.
Okay, so I'm going to say your keyword summary is basically, it's this revolutionary improvement that we can have in education. It's far more than just what you see today. And we're talking about AI. AI is...
And I would say that Esther's comment about the calculator is a really relevant one.
Right. Okay, so we got the fear, we got the teaching assistant, we've got the multiplier on what you can do with education. Before we just jump right into what will education be in future, how can AI be so great or whatever, let's actually just, what's the word? It's kind of like, you know, let's complain a little bit, okay? So what I want to hear is what's wrong with education? Like, before we fix it, what do you not like about it? What does it not do well? What is it supposed to do? You know, maybe it's perfect. Maybe there's nothing better that needs to be done in education, and the AI is great, but why don't we just do things the way it is? What's wrong with education? Let's go back to Esther. What do you think? Is there something wrong with education?
Unfortunately, there's a lot wrong with education. The main thing is that education today, in 2023, is the same as it was 100 years ago. There's a professor that lectures, and the students take notes, and then the class is over in an hour, and then they leave. And everyone knows, educational research shows, that lecture is the least effective way to teach, and we're still doing it. It's crazy. I mean, even, you know, I'm connected with the University of California, Berkeley, and I can tell you they're still learning math and science and whatever in classes with 500 people and one professor lecturing. And we know, as an educator, I know that people learn by doing. They don't learn by watching. But we're still doing the watching.
Yeah, so that's a really strong point, right? I mean, it's like if learning is about doing and programming that in your head, and we're only watching, okay, that's a big problem by itself. I'm not sure if Esther is still, if the internet's fully working there. We can come back to her. You tell me something you don't like about education today.
Well, first I would say that you mentioned I've built a lot of companies, I've a lot of patents. I would never be accepted as a student to your institution. I'm not even, and I've been a professor and I've
That's
taught.
not only because we have you on a list to deny.
Yes,
right.
not just the blacklist
there's
part.
other
but
reasons.
let's not mention that thing that happened.
Right, it's on the blacklist.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people like me that would never fit into the industrial machine that is Victorian scalability of systems. And that's one problem. So there's a loss function of really bright minds. And the part that's more offensive to me is the loss of people that don't have the opportunity because of where they were born, because of their economic situation, because of what they look like.
Yeah.
And I think making higher education accessible to a broader swath of the population is, again, a pure upside.
Okay, so there's the kind of accessibility part. That, that's really what you're talking about here. And there's kind of two versions of accessibility. One is you can't afford it. One is you're in a place far away, you don't have the economic means, all of those things. Another version of inaccessibility is that universities can be too narrow in what they think smart means. So they say, if you scored this number on a test, you can get in. And if you didn't score that number on a test, you can't get in. But what if there's actually 10 different ways to be smart, and that was only one, but they were just cutting on that one? So, there's the accessibility where you are and how much money you have. There's the accessibility of even if you're the right type of smart, right? So you say, okay,
your
that's
culture,
a problem.
your language, many different reasons.
Yeah, right.
For preventing and the actual medium that is used as well.
So, I'll say a couple things that annoy me about education, and I actually have a long list, believe it or not. And I'll just see if you guys agree or you want to add on or you disagree with that. But a couple more things that I think are kind of wrong with education. One is there's this assumption that the teacher knows everything and the student just needs to get that information directly from the teacher. I think people really learn against the challenge of what they're trying to do, and that the teacher is supposed to create that environment, not just give them information. I think another thing that's kind of wrong with education.
I just want to say that I agree 100%.
All right, that's when she agrees, that's a victory for me. So, all right. And then, more things, I guess, when we teach people things, it's like we can teach them math and logic and things like that, but we usually don't teach them behaviors. We usually don't teach them mindsets. And when people are successful in the world, it's not just because they can solve a math problem faster or that they can read faster or comprehend faster. It's also because how they react to the word no, or like 20 other things that happen in real life, partly between generating trust with people and EQ and your comfort zone and like all kinds of other things. And so there's another thing that I think, it's like our best version of doing that is work on a project together. And by the way, the topic of the math on the project isn't really all you're going to learn. You're going to learn a bunch of other things. But it's just a rough proxy. I'm just saying there's so much more to teach than the narrow part that's normally in education. Viewpoint?
I agree. I think the foundational medium of conveyance of knowledge is about to be totally upended by these technologies, and that's kind of where we maybe veer into what it is.
Okay, so I'm going to watch the time, and at a certain point we're going to switch over and we're going to stop complaining about education, and we're going to ask you, well, how could it be better? Yeah. But I got one more, I'll just say one more kind of example of something that I think has gone wrong, and this is with technology. So I would watch my daughter take math classes in California. Okay, so back in California, and they use technology. Mm-hmm. They have programs on websites, and you're supposed to click on, you do the problem, and you click on it, and you don't understand it. There's something else you can click on to explain it. They have all this stuff, okay? And I can't tell you how much time gets wasted just trying to put the answer in the format that the technology wants it. I don't know, Esther, if you have had this experience, but it's like the kid knows exactly how to do the problem, they got it, and now they entered the number 42.13, and they're like, no, not the right answer. 42.132, nope, that's not the answer. Pi times this number divided by that. Nope, that's not the answer. And then eventually you finally get the one way that they want it, and you're like, okay, we just wasted like an hour, even though we knew it. And that's when the technology was supposed to make it better, supposedly, and it actually just made it completely worse. Okay, again, another problem. Maybe you have more. We're going to switch to how it could be better, but if you guys got more you want to complain about, you just tell me.
Esther, maybe, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I think that is a really valid concern that you just expressed, because, just using the technology and getting it in the right blank is a real problem. A lot of people have that in all sorts of things that they're doing online. But also, the other major problem that I think is that kids they're very smart, and they find alternative ways to get the information, or in fact, they find even more information. And then they're not rewarded in any way for being innovative or being even more curious. They're rewarded for actually doing what you just said, filling in the blank with the direct answer that the software wants or that the teacher wants. But if you give kids more of an opportunity to be in control of the learning, and to come up with answers that might not be the answers that the teacher thinks is the answer, there's a lot more learning that takes place. And not only that, a lot more excitement. Kids get really into it. And so that's what I would like to suggest.
Yeah, perfect. I just say one short thing and then you go ahead. But I just want to say that's an example where technology actually constrained you more than helping. It's like it just locked you into that fill in the blank, but even a harder blank and a more narrow one. It didn't open up the world for you. And I think wherever we go with the AI, I hope we don't go there. I hope we don't go to, that is wrong, it's like instead of on the screen, it just tells it to you. Well, it doesn't matter. It didn't help you. Go ahead.
Now, I was going to say that I mentioned I wouldn't get accepted in this university, but most of them. So the only place that did accept me was an art school, which I spent some time in. And sometimes you need art to express something that's hard to put in words, especially because it's not in our experience. So I actually brought you a gift. And you can see it on the screen. It's actually, Esther, I'm going to give you one too.
This is my one gift of the year.
I'm going to put it next to your Zoom monitor.
I have to really cherish it. Okay.
If we can put up the slide on this, Marco, on the screen. And it's actually a gift to all of you. You can scan that code and grab it. And the person that will give us the most thought-provoking question will get one as well. And the story I try to tell through a metaphor here has to do, I think, with starting with humility. I think a lot of times in an educational context, you expect the person speaking to you to know the answers, which is what a professor does. You come in, we tell you how it is. And of course, the role of events like this is to try to prescribe a way for you to process what's going on. But I would argue that in this revolution we're living through, to make it clear, you are the goldfish. And the metaphor is that if you have a goldfish sitting on your counter at home, which I do, and I left my home in New York and got in a cab and got on a plane and came here, and they have no way to understand that I did all those things.
The goldfish doesn't know.
The goldfish can't comprehend this idea.
It's obviously not a smart goldfish.
It's got its little bubble. It's not smart. It's just that's its world. And that is a means to think about what AI is, because AI has the ability to understand things that we can't necessarily understand through the glass ceiling of our biological evolution, our cognition. it is able to do things that we can't do on an individual basis. Now, we don't
I just want to make sure, we're the goldfish.
We are the goldfish.
We're the goldfish, and AI is the thing that knows that you got on the plane and came back and has, is that what you're saying? It has the rest of the information?
Well, the point is that, so I made a conscious effort to not dress appropriately for the event. And I dressed like my tribe, the people that are building these technologies. And I can tell you, we're all terrified of this because we don't know how it works. And you'll talk to the greatest minds at OpenAI, and what's happening is we are seeing emergent phenomenon.
Yeah, they don't know how it works either.
Engineers don't appreciate that. Engineers, we build things, we're building a machine that does that, right? We built this machine, it's doing things we didn't dream it will do, and we all feel we're in the beginning of a journey. So I'm saying, as the person that's done this for 30 years, I don't understand it. That's where humility comes in, right? Now, I don't take that to, it's going to kill all of us. I take it to, where is this massive potential to empower people and how we do it? And I think for me what it means for education is that we should think of this as a medium of communication. So if you study Marshall McLuhan and the media is the message, and great YouTube video on that, if you're not familiar with this thinking, so prescient. The medium that you use to communicate between humans very much defines the experience. And all mediums we had until this point, think about going back to before the Gutenberg press, you had priests speaking Latin, copying stuff, a monopoly on knowledge. We had Gutenberg press, then we had the internet. Suddenly my kid has all of the world's information in his pocket. But they've all been a way to encode some ideas in a hard shell and try to move it into your brain. And AI is not that. AI is ability to encode ideas in a way that is conversational, where when it engages with another mind, that other mind can start a conversation with it. Going back to the Socratic method, and was mentioned by the person that spoke earlier about his experience with Oxford, where they get 98% better scores. The reason they do is because that medium of conversation, which is what happens in the classrooms when there's a lecture, is 100 times more potent than here's a book, figure it out, in terms of the speed of velocity of learning. And today already, we kind of have that capability. It's kind of best captured, if you haven't seen this TED Talk by Sal Khan, a hero of mine, hopefully most of you in the education field, I can't think of a life better spent than what this man has accomplished in democratizing education. Right. And when they launched GPT-4, he was one of their launch partners. And it's very easy to see the doom and gloom of how AI is going to disrupt the workforce and create unemployment and try to kill us and all the things that it can do. It's not trivial to find the good things, because that's always the case, by the way, with humans, unfortunately. And if you watch this 15-minute thing, you'll see this premise, which was also articulated in the prior session, is that when you have one-on-one tutoring, you jump 2 sigmas better in terms of outcomes. But we've never had the ability to do that. We didn't have the money, we didn't have the infrastructure.
I'd like to just correct the last speaker from earlier. 2 sigmas is 94.5%. I just want to say,
thank you.
It's not 92,
engineering you is
it's not
really
97,
popping out.
But continue on.
And now we do. Now we can offer one-on-one tutoring around any content base to curious minds, so they can learn at their own pace, in their own way, which we know empirically fundamentally changes the outcomes. So I think we're going to be in a place where the future of academia is that there is this foundational IP, intellectual property that academia has, like IE. And that IP is the collective intelligence of all of the bright minds that attracted, like yourself, the students that learn there, all those conversations, and you can converse with it. And even when you retire and you have a student that really appreciated the learnings from you, they will be able to come back and start a conversation informed by everything that you've taught and created. So it's a fun, and I think that will be the most important asset of a university in the future.
Let me try to turn this into a dialogue a little bit. So, kind of, the summary so far is we've got this knowledge. Before, we just wrote it somewhere and it was static. But AI is a medium. So now you can talk to the AI can translate that set of knowledge. It's very fluid, you can go back and forth. But the fact is, it's changing, it's a medium, it just gives you another window, whatever window you want into knowledge, it gives it to you.
It's the first living medium we've had.
It's a living, even though it's AI.
It's not a dead medium.
Yeah, dynamic.
It's alive.
Right? Yeah.
We're publishing an AI. We're not publishing a document.
I'm not convinced it's alive, but you know, all right, we'll get
alive
there.
in that it's not static.
Yeah.
It's not fixed.
All right. Here's my question to you guys, okay?
Can we get Esther back on the screen, please?
Yeah. My question to you
Marco?
is, did that make any sense to you? Do you follow that? Do you say, oh yeah, it's a medium, I know exactly what you mean? What do you think? How many people say, oh, obvious, yeah, it's a medium?
Yes.
How many people, yeah, go ahead, ask a question.
Going on with this view of AI in artificial intelligence, my question is, I am a secondary teacher, and students love dialogue in class. Mainly, they are developing their formal thinking, and mainly what they want is to disagree with you.
Yep.
As a teacher, as a person, as a whatever. Can you disagree with artificial intelligence, or is like chess, that every time it's going to be upper in knowledge from me, from the students, from everybody?
Why do you think the students like to disagree? Why do you think that? Why does that phenomenon exist?
Because they are starting to develop some procedures that is easier for them, yes and no.
Maybe
right?
Maybe they're practicing their critical thinking.
Of course, but they consider that I am a human and we are equal somehow.
Yeah, okay.
Can they disagree with artificial intelligence or not?
Okay. His point is basically, what if this AI seems too knowing and too powerful? Maybe you might be intimidated to disagree. Let's get Esther's point of view on this. Esther, has a student ever disagreed with you in class?
Well, actually, I think students like to challenge you, and it makes them feel like, you know, they're thinking and that they're somewhat better. And yes, a lot of students have disagreed, and I actually found that pretty exciting as opposed to threatening, because some of the ideas that they came up with were actually better than my ideas, and I had to admit that, and of course it made them happy. I think you can still disagree with AI, because I can tell you there's a lot of answers that I've gotten from AI that are not correct. Actually, I have to laugh at some of them.
I got to agree with you there.
I'm afraid that AI to say the wrong thing.
I have to agree with you there in the sense that if AI gives me an answer and you give me an answer, for now, I'm going to go with yours. Like, you know, there's a lot of, you know, hallucination's not even really the right word. There's a lot of randomness in what I mean, it'll be different. I understand it'll be different in 10 years. It'll be different in 5 years. Right now, I don't think any student is afraid of disagreeing with the AI, or they should not be. In fact, I think they should be using it to really sharpen their critical thinking. I mean, the reason why I disagree with people is usually, well, partly the enjoyment, but the main reason why I disagree with people is because I want to test whether I'm right or not. So I'm like, oh, that's not right, correct? And then if they say, no, you're wrong, it is, let me show you. And then I say, okay, so I'm right or I'm wrong. I use it to figure out, quote, the truth. I mean, that's why you do it.
Yeah, I think to your question, just I want to give you a more direct answer. So first, I want to demystify it a bit for you. If you look at that video that I just shared from Khan Academy, you'll see that what they've built is a tutor, not someone that just gives you the answer. It does not give you the answer. It is literally having a conversation with the student that is meant to scaffold their understanding in the same way that a good teacher would do, with empathy, and it does it really well today. So I think the question is informed a bit by the way we think of, let's say, the calculator or Google, where there's a question and an answer. So one of the misconceptions of using ChatGPT or these models is that it's a search engine or a way to find information. It is not.
That's right, it's not.
It is an idea engine. It's not a search engine, it's an idea engine. And it's, furthermore, I would argue it's effectively a compression of reality. It's like a multiverse, a world that you can traverse, move around, simulate things, simulate entire situations. So most of us are still at the point where we're just saying, okay, write a blog post and boom, and that's it. That is not what this thing is. That's why I'm saying a lot of it is misunderstood. This can create entire time-traveling worlds that you can traverse. And if you go to just Google OpenAI educators blog post, OpenAI actually published the prompt that made that Khan Academy tutor work.
Yeah.
And it's so incredibly simple and short. It's like literally this long. And it's a list. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and that's it.
They may not have published everything.
They
about
have.
it.
They have. I've used it.
Yeah?
Yeah, and it works. So it's important to not be intimidated by this because it's all accessible to you. You can literally take that prompt, put it in ChatGPT and start a session and you'll see that it's actually doing this and you can change it. So you as a creative mind can change it for your students. You can say, be more critical, be more accepting of other ideas, and it will do that. Now, it's important to see it not as a search engine. It's not good at retaining information, and part of the reason is because it is creative. Now, I think it's Picasso that said that all of us are born artists and it gets pounded out of us, right? Our AIs were also born artists. They're making shit up, and it's sometimes dangerous, but some would call that creativity, and we're trying to stamp it out, right? We're trying to normalize it. So as a creativity tool, actually, you don't want to stamp that out. If you're trying to find a new cure for Parkinson's, then, or some other Alzheimer's, you don't want to stomp out creativity. You want to leave that. So we have to recognize that for what it is, and not think that this is replacing Google, because it's not.
Right. No, it's actually something you're going to adjust. Let me actually try to, like, in the few minutes that we have left, let me try to take us to a completely farther space. Okay.
And show what it'll look like.
Yeah. Let's talk about, what do you think of the day when the instructor is an AI, where half your classmates are AI, your lab partner is an AI, you're working on a project and 2 people are human, and there's 2 experts on your team, and they are AIs that you can talk to about the project before you turn it in. What do you think about that world? Let's go back to Esther, and let's get your point of view. Esther, is that a horrible world? Is that a good world? And what is the role of the real teacher in all of this kind of stuff?
So I think that's a really funny world to think about. I'm not sure that that's a real world. I don't see the AI sort of taking over, and then you have friends that are AI. It's sort of like they keep trying to say that old people want to have robots take care of them. I don't know anybody that wants to have a robot take care of them.
Because they can't, the kids don't call them back.
By a robot.
Only young people say that.
I love the idea. But I think that the AI can be a partner and help the teacher. By the way, I just wanted to say that Khan Academy has a whole website devoted to how to teach using AI. So for those of you that are interested, you can go online and find it. And I don't think that that they say that the teacher should just retire and now the AI can take over.
All right. Okay. All right. So we have one vote for that's not going to happen. All right. That version that I just explained. What's your view? You work with multi-agent. You work with. You're in a room with 2 other AIs, and you're all having a discussion, an argument with them. You're learning something. Does it work? Does it not work?
I think as we start to embrace this, to the extent we look at it as a medium, as an empowerment tool. So I'm old enough to remember where we didn't have PowerPoint, and I remember learning from stencils, right? And before the Xerox machine. So technologies help educators project their way of communicating, and this technology can do things. If we can go back to the presentation, that is kind of mind-boggling. Marco, let's see the slides again. So I'll just show you an example of that, where we can take a PowerPoint file, create a digital twin of Ikla, and basically allow him to...
Welcome, everyone. Today we're going to dive into an exciting topic.
What we're seeing here is a bit of a robotic version of him, but the input was just the PowerPoint. This was the orientation session for his course. The input is the PowerPoint slides, and the AI is sufficiently intelligent so that it can actually write the script that explains these slides.
My AI's haircut is better than mine. How did you do that?
Dude, I think you're wearing the same clothes.
No, it's a different shirt.
Oh, you sure? Okay.
Look closely.
So I kind of do this all day, every day, and most times the responses, that actually was better than what I could have done. And it's not better because it's replacing you. You still created the outline, the content, it's still informed by the way you speak and what you've done, but now there's a digital twin of you that you can now create more content, and incidentally in the platform, if I don't understand something that you're explaining, I can type in the question and he will stop and answer the question. This is not a dead medium anymore. It's a living medium.
We finally have an answer to that instructor engagement problem.
At scale. and now you can also teach a really bright mind, a little girl in Africa that is curious.
You can scale.
And you can scale.
It solves your scale problem.
And you can speak her language. And she can converse with you, but it's still on the basis, the pedagogy that you set forth, the collective intelligence of the institution.
Okay, question for the audience, just for 1 second. Let's suppose you actually wanted to take a data science course from me, suppose, okay? Do you want to take it from the AI or do you want to take it from me live?
That's the emotional blackmail.
No, I just want to know. All right, how many people say, I want to take it from the AI? Okay, now you're going to get the same number who say, I
think the number should be 0.
Yeah, how many people want to take it from me?
Yeah.
Okay, what would it take to change that?
Well, can I phrase the question slightly differently?
Okay.
What if you couldn't tell if it's you or the AI?
All right, what if you couldn't tell? Would it make a difference? Well, you wouldn't know, I guess. All these years,
That's the world
my students don't know. They've never met me. Yeah, okay. All right, no.
You've been an AI all along.
It's always been AI.
We had to switch apart there before you stepped on stage.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute. There's one other thing.
Yeah.
How happy are you to talk to AI as opposed to talk to a live person about a problem that you're having?
Yeah, I think we could go a lot of ways on that one. I'll just make this one comment because I know we're kind of at the end of time here. The comment to me is, if you can use the technology to have a personal connection with a greater number of people, that doesn't mean they have the connection with the AI. They have, maybe it's assisted by the AI, but now instead of knowing 50 students or 30, I could actually know and interact with 500, it might actually change the equation. But
the problem with the question posed is the premise of the question is wrong, because the people on the other side will not discern if it's an AI or not. The Turing test has already been passed.
Fine.
So there's a problem in the premise. When you have this collective intelligence for IE, which takes the brightest minds that teach here, now you can have the benefit of speaking to all of them about a multidisciplinary problem on demand, informed by their teachings, and also fuse together two personas. Let's say you're very analytical and engineering minded, and there's another person that brings in more behavioral knowledge, and you can ask this kind of hybrid of your thoughts and her thoughts the same question and get different answers. So this is where we start seeing things that are emergent, that are not in our past experience. And if the objective function is to learn something better or to solve a problem, if we can go back to the slide for a second,
all right.
You can have...
I'm going to give you about 30 seconds because we got to go.
Yeah, You're very... I said you can download this. This was created with AI, by the way. It's just basic, but in a year, it will be amazing. But the piece I wanted to briefly share with you is not this one, but rather this one. This is where the cutting edge of my field is. This is referred to as basically multi-agent. So today you're talking to a single person, like a kind of like Siri when you talk to an agent.
Yeah.
But what's happening now is we now have this ability to create these personas, these
different people. Yeah.
Entities with different types of expertise. So here you can't probably read the text, but I was suggesting how can IE embrace AI? Let's raise the volume a bit.
With generative AI, we can plot a course into the future of higher education in a way that is powered by innovation and creativity. This technology has the potential to revolutionize the way we teach
these are all
and learn,
different
making
type of
education
experts.
more personalized and
He's a
adaptive.
generative AI strategist. Next time we have a senior UX designer, a copywriter, a change management advisor.
I think pause it. You'll be able to make the point.
Maybe lower the volume. Just lower the volume.
But your point is that all these AIs are talking to each other.
They're helping you solve a problem.
Yeah, right. And we're definitely getting there. Like, you can actually have a synthetic group. Okay, I'm going to say, final 20-second comment as we wrap up here. Go ahead, Edo, and then Esther, and then it's a wrap. What is the emergent thing that happened in this conversation?
I'm just trying to leave it with a thought.
Yeah,
Just a simple thought that historically we've used media to communicate learning.
Yeah.
Whether it's sitting in front of in an auditorium with a PowerPoint deck or a book, a textbook, and just imagine that premise of what the media is gets reinvented as a living media. What are the implications for learning?
Okay, all right. I hope it's smarter. But I agree with you. Okay, Esther, your final comment on, kind of overview whatever we talked about, or out of whatever we talked about.
I'm excited about what I heard this morning, or this evening for you. The medium is the message. The medium is part of the message, I think. And I do think that AI can be a really strong partner in helping students learn, provided that we give students an opportunity to explore and not to be graded down when they do something that might need revision.
Maybe AI is the future lab where you can do whatever you want instead of it telling you what to do.
That's right. You can explore using AI, and you can learn from AI, and it can be a very enriching experience. But I don't think I'm really ready to have a friend at AI, even though I know little kids seem to like Surrey.
Yeah.
After they get to be over 5, they realize Surrey isn't real.
Fair enough. Okay, we'll save all our Siri jokes for later. I personally have no extra opinions to add. I think you guys have been the most awesome guests. I want to say, first of all, Edo flew all the way from New York for this 1 hour. I mean, he's got like a super tight schedule. Like, thank you. And, there's a lot going on in the world, and the fact that you can come here, focus on this important thing with us for, this hour, I really appreciate it. Esther, I have to admit, I've known you for a while. This isn't the first time we ever met. I appreciate you popping in here. Your wisdom is phenomenal. I always enjoy it. Thank you for spending the time with us. And I'd say thank you to the audience for...
Thank you.
Thank you so much, guys, to be here in your real versions. Thank you to Esther Bosivsky as well. Thank you to the goldfish.
No.
Yeah. Real version.
Not the hologram.
Now I see you. I think that I prefer your AI haircut. Okay, so let's go there to pick it. Bueno, y muchas gracias también por darnos las claves para...
Well, thanks also for giving us the keys to start understanding how AI will end up changing the future of education. This has been the last session today. Tomorrow we start at 11 with the presentation by Priya Lakhani, the founder of Century Tech, which focuses on improving education centers by using AI. I'd like to say bye to those who have been following us by streaming. Tomorrow we wait for you here at 11 a.m. Hope you are all punctual tomorrow. And before you leave, I'd like to tell you that in the 4th floor we have Awwz DJ, which is a DJ that generates music with AI, using AI. So it's the perfect wrap up for today's session. So thanks a lot. Thanks for being here.